Thank you so much. Hi everyone. First of all, who here in this room is a developer? Okay, most of you are developers. Do we have admins? Okay, do we have users, like just end users? No? Okay. Who here has used Flow, a process builder? 3, 4 people. Okay, many of you have not. Is that because you just write code and you don't touch anything else? Or is that because you have a reason not to?
Because I like code and I don't like to touch anything else.
Right. So we are on the same side. Nonetheless, a year ago we started with our trial about clicks and codes and understood that things were a little weird, to say the least. And today we will be taking you on our journey, and this talk is the third talk we're doing on the topic, and none of the talks is actually the same. So we started a year back again. We presented a Czech Dreaming in Prague. Daniel took the topic to Dreamforce this year and put some more wisdom in it, and now we are presenting on it the third time. And I hope this is so far our final results. And to sum it up, things have gotten better since we started in Prague. But without further ado, this is Daniel Stange. He is technical architect for Die Interaktiven in Frankfurt. My name is Christian Sander Knapp. I usually go by Sander. I work for an ISV in Munich, and we both lead local community groups in Frankfurt and Munich, respectively. You can find us on Twitter, and since we are on Developer Meetup, we also put our GitHub URLs there, so if you want to explore what we did in our free time, or did not complete in our free time, then please go there. One last thing, if things are going too fast for you, if there are any things that you can't follow or can't understand, just raise your paw and say, hey, once again, please, I didn't get it, right? I know we have a language barrier. For everyone, for us, it's a second language, not the first one, so no hurt feelings. Without further ado, let's get started. You heard the name Kafka. So anyone who is familiar with Kafka, that is not Apache Kafka? Good. At least one person. So yes, so Kafka was a writer, and a Prague and Czech writer, or a German writer, depending on how you want to summarize it. But at the end of the day, I love Kafka, I love his texts, and his texts are weird. And that's why we choose the topic to illustrate our talk. So it's a mixture between literature, Salesforce, and development. So hence our topics here mirror books or texts by Kafka. So we start with the metamorphosis, the change. Something has changed, and we were witnesses of that change. We all in this room were witnesses of that change. And I believe we also are afraid of a few things around this change, because we might have made very bad experiences. Then we go to the trial, or actually the retrial, because we retrialed all assumptions that we both developed a year ago, and some of them simply died. And we will follow through with what we learned, and at the end do the judgment, another text by Kafka, and give you our statistical evidence and what we call forensic evidence. So we did a lot of measuring around clicks and code. Metamorphosis, this is a German quotation. Salesforce ist eine beständige Ablenkung, die nicht darüber zur Besinnung kommen lässt, wovon sie eigentlich ablenkt. So Salesforce is a constant distraction that distracts you from even grasping what you are being distracted from. Right, so one morning when Gregor Samsa woke from troubled dreams, he found himself in 2010, right up here, 2010. And if we think about click automation in 2010, we only got workflows, and then that's it, and afterward Apex, right? You may know the screenshot for a workflow rule, that's about it. But now, in 2020, we have workflows, we have process builder, we have before save flows, now in spring, and we have even Apex with platform events, right? And to cut the chase short, here's what we're all afraid of, right? So we are afraid of limit exceptions. Or maybe, oh, I think the text got cut away, CPU time exceptions. So at the end of the day, we are all fearing lots of bugs and being chased by bugs, or waking up one morning and our work broke because somebody added some kind of automation and everything went down the sink. So what do we do? Well, we can look into the documentation, of course, and you might find some very weird things there as well. Like in summer 2019, you might have found something like that in your debug logs. As you all should know, if you are developers, there is the CPU time limit. And what's the CPU time limit? 10 seconds, right? And if you now have a look, oops, sorry, giving away too much. Okay, and if you look over here, what's there? 15. So CPU time in milliseconds, 240 out of 15, and up here, 240 out of 10, right? That was a mistake on Salesforce's behalf. There are no two limits. There's just one limit, for us at least. For them internally, completely different story. But for us, this is a bug. It's got a work item number. It probably is already fixed. So if you look into the debug logs right now, you won't see any difference in the CPU time. Funny side note, if you look for CPU time in the flow documentation, you will not find a single hit. Not one. But okay, we are all senior developers, so we know there are limits outside of flows, and those are the system limits, so we might figure out, okay, CPU time is actually a limit for flow as well. But usually we only realize that when it's too late, because it's already broke. So we did our retrial. Another Kafka quotation, the right understanding of any matter and the right misunderstanding of the same matter do not wholly exclude each other, right? And that's how we felt when we did our measurements. And here's what we did. Let's start with a little quiz. Can you follow along properly? All good? Great, awesome. So let's imagine we are inserting 2,000 records via Apex or data loader, right? And we have a process builder set up that simply sets a Boolean to true. So a checkbox is false and then it is set to true. And the questions we're asking you, and where are my prices? Come on. No, not chewing gums, no. But little nice goatee pins or Cody pins and so on for the person who's able to answer correctly, of course. So we are inserting 2,000 records. And Process Builder ticks a checkbox. That's all the functionality there is. Do challenge yourselves. How many queries will be consumed? How many DML statements will be consumed? How much CPU time will be consumed? Those are not trick questions.
Are we setting with just one DML statement?
You say one DML?
No, I mean the inside of the record is only
Yes,
one DML.
just one DML.
One large operation,
Okay.
2,000 records go into the database.
Okay.
Now, why are you asking for queries? You're inserting.
Yeah, well, it's not a trick question, so there's a reason why I'm asking for queries. Although it's an insert. Any guesses?
I'd say 0.
Pardon?
I'd say 0.
0. Yeah,
Zero.
zero queries. Very good.
0.
How much CPU time?
I'd say
Just a guess.
sound-
Just a
2 seconds.
2 seconds. Okay, DML statements. 1, 2,
One.
3.
Total, there will be
One.
one for the insert.
Okay.
But it's gonna be 0.
Okay, we have 10 queries.
Uh-huh.
Aha! We have 11 DML statements. Oh! And we have 0 CPU time. So from that perspective, Process Builder okay. So what's happening there? Does anybody have a guess? Yes,
I
please.
would suspect that as in the triggers, we are cutting every 200 records.
Mhm.
So if we divide into 10, we will have such wave number. This is not exactly what we are
Yeah.
seeing in the debug.
A Cody, what would you like? Okay, here you go. Oh, it's an
Wow, nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Most welcome. Right, that's exactly it. So whatever process builder does is bulkified as everything is bulkified in Salesforce by chunking to 200 thingies, 200 chunks of 200 records. The other thing is you see 11 DML statements, sorry, over there. The very first, the one, is ours. That's when we did insert something. Now the way process builder works is that it works on after update. So your insert is basically complete, and then process builder starts a new save cycle, which means it does a new DML. And since 2000 divided by 200 is 10, it does 10 additional DML statements. Now, what about the queries? Any ideas? We have 10 queries, which means, according to theory, each DML statement, each process builder run consumes one query. Can you guess why? Okay, no worries. Because process builder needs to query the record. In order to get the Boolean, in order to set it to true, it needs to query the record, and that's where the YAML statements come. And that's one of the reasons why you should have just one process builder per object currently, because if you have several, there will be several queries, and then you might be hitting one of our dear threaded exceptions, the query limit exception.
The good news is you won't hit the CPU time limit, right?
Yeah.
Somehow.
We will get to that. So let's leave that for a little mystery for now and continue further. So basically, this is another trial from Wells. Anyway, I'm an ISV, right? And if something breaks in a subscriber's org and somehow my namespace is displayed, it's finger pointing, right? Your code broke, you did a bad job. And basically you can point with fingers all over. You can say it's custom trigger, it's integration, it's an ISV package, it's a flow. And we wanted to get at the bottom of this. And we thought about an advanced setup and said we want to mock an advanced system with triggers and logging. And we will insert a lot of simple records and do an operation on them and then simply measure our results. Okay? Now in order to do this, we use two tools which you can find on GitHub as well. One is the logger thingy. Maybe I should brag a little about it because it gives you instant information, the ones you want, with all details like which line number, what method name was run, and you don't need to type it by hand, and uses platform events to get that things out of the synchronous cycle so that the logs won't get lost. And my trigger down here is a custom metadata driven trigger framework. So basically you have a table of records where you say, please run for this object, this class in the order 2. And run this class for this object in order 1 before insert. So you can, even in production, then go in and click off and your trigger is off, or this part of functionality is off. And what, to me, one of the great benefits of a trigger framework that uses CMD is when I go into an org and there is my triggers in there, I go to the CMD records and know exactly what is running and how. If I go to a org that just writes triggers, I need to go into each individual trigger and look which events are there, what's happening there, which classes are being called. Okay, that's our setup. And yeah, the judgment, that's what we're all interested in. Yeah? And well, that's not so true anymore. It was maybe true in Prague. It's unbearably dark in here, but we will get to it. And I think this is the perfect spot probably to give it over to Daniel, who was the taskmaster of measuring everything, because I hate graphs, right? I just can't do, like you can't do flow and process builder, I can't watch and work with Excel or spreadsheets or dashboards. Daniel, over to you.
Exactly, yeah. It is always a bit tricky to talk about the choice of automations to a group of just developers, because The tools that our developers choose will most likely be code. And if you look at that graph, code is doing just fine. Boom, or on the winning side. My message here is just, whatever choice you make, it impacts how you consume limits from your org. And in some cases, limits will be consumed faster than in others. And you have to kind of plan for the case that someone comes and uses process builder to do this and that. So using code and being on the good side of the graph doesn't mean you can just blow away the limits as you like it. Keep that in mind, but as a first indicator, I was just doing what Sandor did in the beginning. I ran an update on a Boolean field, setting a checkbox and creating a task with that to just get a bit more spice into that. And you can see that for the first sum records, everything is really close to each other, and then process builder consumes more and more and more time. I will tell you or give you a hint, at least, why this is that way in just a few minutes. You can see workflow rules and triggers perform almost the same in this scenario. One idea why process builder takes so much longer when it comes to bulky operations is that you can see there's a lot of flow interviews that get started when you start process builder. You have probably heard that process builder technically is flow with just another interface. And there's safe harbor something coming in summer that changes this a bit. So process builder as we know it, flow as we know it will be a bit different probably. That's what we heard at Dreamforce, and that's what we saw in the upcoming spring release. Flow is going to be different. But there's a whole long list of process builder invoked flow interviews here, and still the ML statements break down to 7, even though 604 flow interviews have been started. So something's going on behind the scenes. Process builder breaks down the operations into hundreds of flows, and still it consumes only 7 ML. What we did in Prague was showing something like this, and you can see these kind of spikes here. This is when you cut over 200 to 201 records, and immediately you see boom, process builder exploding, and again 400 to 401, boom, and it's exploding. Spectacular, a spectacular slide. We put it on Twitter. We have lots and lots of retweets and likes for that slide, and lots of comments. And our beloved Peter Chittum, developer evangelist, said, "You gotta talk to the team, you gotta talk to the team." So that's what we did. We had the honor to talk to some people on actually the product managers for Flow and Process Builder.
I think Alex Edelstein.
Yeah, and Jason Keller was.
Jason, yes.
We had Jason Keller on the call. So these people were really interested in our
At first.
in what we said. Then we told them what we did, and then
They shrugged.
they shrugged and said, "Okay, that's something." So what we found out in that conversation is we were actually right with what we measured and what we celebrated as our huge success. And then they went to the statistics and said, "Look, boys, let's see how many people in all over the world did what you did in the past quarter of a year." And I said, "Oh, nobody." There is one, 3 months back. So they showed us the statistics of how Salesforce works internally, and literally nobody on the whole planet, and probably the one person who did that. So one org on the planet in a quarter of a year did what we did.
And what did we do?
What we did is we used Apex to create tens of thousands of records and execute DML right from the Apex context. And this is something that they didn't plan for, and they don't want to plan for. They told us straight away, "We're not going to fix this. It's a problem, we know, but who cares?" The others, 99.999% work fine, and we can fix this.
And why was our example constructed? Because, and that's what we also realized, not ourselves even before talking to Jason Taylor, was we created those records or those numbers of records in memory in a synchronous context. So we broke the 200 records rule, right? So whatever you do, if you do data load or whatever, you can set up the batch size. So usually there are very, very few points in the system where you can go in and create more than 200 records at once. And that's what we did. We told Apex, okay, if you insert that record, you create a child record. And that sums up to several thousand records, but those are all in memory, and the usual way records come into an org is by chunks of 200 or 100 or anyway, not several thousands. And that's how we found about the limits of the flow or process builder engine limitations and learned that it is no business goal of Salesforce to mitigate those limits because no one's using it that way, which is a perfectly acceptable answer, right? But we didn't stop there, we continued.
Yeah. So, this is actually spectacular, but more or less useless.
Well, it's academic.
We came to a better way to think about it.
Daniel and myself love academia. He's actually a historian. I studied philosophy and literature, so we're not your usual tech guys.
Yes. One question.
Yes.
Have you tested doing this through the command line interface? Is there any difference doing it through SFTX or internally in Salesforce?
We actually executed Apex through the command line interface, so
Probably
we
works
did
the same, right?
it works more or less the same. If you use the tree upload, you will be perfectly in this data upload scenario again because you hit 200 chunks of 200 against the API. If you execute Apex from the command line, you are back in running the developer console the only difference is that you can prepare the file as a script that and run it through the command line. But we actually did this through the command line to script the parameters, how many records are we going to create.
Yeah, otherwise you would have to hire an intern who does nothing else than 8 hours of clicking in Salesforce and writing down numbers in an Excel sheet.
I did this in my holiday.
I love you.
Okay. Let's talk about flow and process bulkification. I'm always telling people not to outsmart flow in process builder when it comes to bulkification. People, developers turning to flow, go enormous ways to build as they did in code, like creating collection variables, put everything in a collection variable, run just one update, and flow just close the limits as it was nothing. And if you build it the completely wrong way, flow works fine. This is because flow is looking for something that Salesforce calls bulkifiable as compared to bulkified actions and items. And if you build something like this collection thing that you do as a developer, this is not bulkifiable because it is already bulkified. But the engine wants to bulkify on its own. And this is why. Flow, there are 200 records going into Process Builder. This is here. They load them from the database. This is the one circle call that Sandro just presented. And then they start one flow interview per each record. That's what we saw in the logs. Then they run through each flow interview, probably in parallel, but essentially everything waits until the last flow interview has stopped. This is where the CPU, the time goes. And then they execute all actions that they found bulkifiable, not bulkified, bulkifiable, to be able to bulkify that in bulk. So they kind of have their own developer searching for something to bulkify, and then off goes to the database. And this is actually what happens under the hood, and this is the reason why flow is completely different in terms of bulkification. It's even worse. I won't go into detail. I tried things where I tried to outsmart Salesforce, and Salesforce got me from behind. Like, bam, go away, you idiot. Next is a concept that I presented at Dreamforce that I called the transaction size vector. This is the relation between the number of records that you put into a transaction, this dimension, and the number of records that will actually be touched in the transaction. If you if you just create an opportunity, it will be one opportunity. If you create two opportunities will be touched, and so on. So this is easy. But what happens? It is always on the green side. It will consume more CPU time, etc. So it goes kind of yellow the more records you put in there, but it will always be the straight line here. And then there's the case when there is an opportunity and you want to update the line items. For example, say warranty starts at date X after the close date, and you will copy over the address from the account record. So it touches more and more and more and more records. And then there is the systemic revenue relation from opportunity to account. So if you change the revenue by changing the opportunity line items, it will roll up to the opportunity, will roll up to the account, fire the account trigger as well, and boom, 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 the record number getting higher and higher and higher. And this is the area over the curve. The more things, the more the operation spreads through the database, the more dangerous it's going to get. And this is more or less what we saw in this graph, where in one operation, Apex is touching more and more and more records, and this is actually where the trouble spot came from. So I tried something. I mocked this out to for 1 to 200 opportunities, and I went exactly this use case. The opportunity updates their line items, a random number from 1 to 20, and it all rolls up to product 2.
Why on product 2? I wondered all the time.
It's like, I just wanted to calculate the total revenue per product in opportunities, something like that. I rolled up the total, the line item total to the product 2 record. Just for a product 2 cannot take master detail relations, so it's actually not a generic roll-up, but a constructed one. Nonetheless, the line of the opportunity itself will be just flat here, just under the green curve. And if you add your line items, etc., the transaction can be anything in between here. It's just random numbers, and the mathematical maximum that could happen at the end of the 200 is already way beyond 7,500 for this scenario. If there are 20 line items in here, you will have 7,600 records touched in the operation. And this is dangerously close to the DML rows limit already, and it's just 3 objects that we touch. So you can see it could be randomly as low as here and as high as here, so the number of line items in the opportunity will change. And you can even add more fuel to this fire by using workflows and process builders here, because all of these tools run in the after update context. They are late in the order of execution just because they have to reload the record and update the record. And if you do a field update here, it will always fire the trigger again. Process builder does the field update and will fire the trigger again. Now, the trigger that we saw touched 7,600 records at maximum in this iteration. Now you touch it here, 15,000, 16,200. You touch it here, another DML, and at the end you all ran through 7,600 times 5 is
A lot.
38,000 DML rows.
Well, you blew the limit.
So we're done here.
Yeah, pretty much.
Workflow rule will break the DML limit, and there's the nice message, hey, your code broke. And that's the situation of, hey, you're a developer, your code is bad.
So if you think back about the first slides where we were talking about what we were afraid of, like limit exceptions and so on. So when we went to Prague, our idea basically was, okay, it's due to the click automation. And now we could have realized earlier actually, but nonetheless, no, the click tools and workflow is currently not, well, it's not suggested anymore in the sense of if you look at Trailhead for workflow, you will not find it there, or by now you will find it there because I fought with Chris Duarte to put a little nice notice box saying, well, there is process builder, that's not everything there is, there's also something called workflow, but you shouldn't need it if you get started right now. So Trailhead or the old learning company just wanted to get away from workflow rules. And At the end of the day, the process builder itself and the flow engine are, as we already explained, optimized to bulkify stuff. And still stuff blows, because we still see the limits exceptions and the query exceptions, and that's due to order of execution. And if order of execution isn't a concept that is dear to your heart, then don't fret, because it also is not dear to Salesforce's heart. Right? Nobody at Salesforce likes to talk about order of execution because it's a very, very difficult topic. And it doesn't chime well with the message of you can get things done easily and quickly on the platform. Yes, you can, until you hit limits within the order of execution, and there is where the good people are divided from the not so good people, because the good people will know where to touch in order to get it running again, and the bad people will say, no, that's this flow, or this is you, or that was this package. If you want to learn on order execution, there's a perfect man here. His talk on order execution was a 40-minute talk at Dreamforce this year. You can find it online. He co-presented with Mark Hirsch, an ex-colleague of mine, incidentally, small world. And both are big fans of order of executions. And there are lots of details that are not very well documented. And if you look for order of execution at Trailhead, in Trailhead, for example, you won't find it there, or not explicitly called. And I personally believe this is suboptimal, because we all as developers and administrators, or at least senior administrators, need to know about these things, because they help us to analyze why we hit this limit. And if we don't understand how flow is bulkified within the transaction, or that process builder does another update, and by that starts the whole order of execution cycle again, and nobody tells us that via Trailhead and simple measures. So either they simplify the hell out of it, which I believe they can't, or they start teaching us about it in a way that we can really appreciate it.
So second thing we learned, we jumped the stage in Prague and said, this is not a talk about the order of execution.
Yes, and we found out it is.
Shame on us.
Yeah.
We removed the slide for today.
When should you use which one?
When to do which? I'm just wondering what I did here. It's again trigger and process builder. And process builder is obviously not so good at doing large operations, I told you before, but I did it again and did something that we have from spring 20 on. Here's a green line. It's hard to see because it's almost the same as triggers. It's a green line, and the green line is before safe flow. I'm not sure if you've seen this currently.
Who here has written before insert trigger? Okay, what do you do usually before insert trigger? You look if some values are valid, and if not, you change them, right? And that is now doable by admins, basically.
Yeah.
So if somebody asks you, do a simple validation, if somebody inserts a record, and first answer is obviously, can't you use a validation rule? No, I cannot for that and that reason, I need to query a few things, then you don't need a developer anymore. And the cool thing about the before safe flows, and then I close my bracket again, is they're not the fully functional flows. You can just query records and just modify the record in question. You cannot do DML on other records and so on. This makes it blazingly fast, as we can see.
So in the past, until winter, every admin had to use Process Builder for this kind of stuff, because Process Builder would then fire flow or do its work, and it goes this line. Now, admins can trigger a flow in the before safe context, and it is as fast as and useful as a trigger is. And this is, even from my coder's heart, a big thing, because I can quite know that admins, if they do it right, can break my code as easily as they could in the past. So, one thing that I also tried is make Process Builder run a bit more slim. What we do as developers is just gate away stuff and only execute what we need. I did this in Process Builder, and you can see it dramatically reduces the memory and CPU time footprint. But still, the line goes way up in as soon as the operation is more bulkified.
So can you please, once again, I think it wasn't quite clear.
Yeah.
So what's the red line, what's the blue line? What's the difference between those
Yeah.
process builders?
This is a process builder that just goes into a Boolean field update. It doesn't check if the field is already set or not.
Okay.
So if I've passed in records that have the Boolean set to true, and the process builder will update it nonetheless. This thing has just one condition: is this field false, set it to true. And this is the impact if you just go with the same number of records that already have the field set to true. No work to do. That's just the organizational overhead of running the records through the process builder.
So basically what I'm reading here is then adding additional nodes to my process builder won't be bad for the performance.
Obviously not, right? Because it helps you to keep the overhead quite low and just execute what you need. So if you can remove the process builder, make them more specific to reduce the work that they do.
So 2 rules, 1 process builder per object, so to reduce after update reruns of executions, and obviously use nodes to do your decision branching.
Absolutely. So, change, as Sandro said in the beginning, change is inevitable. It's always there, and we have to face it. The big change that is definitely that is coming in spring, and we're all looking to, at least both of us are looking forward to, because it reduces the chance of being shot in the lead by someone else.
That's one side. The other side is that I think we as developers know how to write code. And many of the things, please contradict me, I hope I am wrong. Many of the things we write in code are banal, like banalities, simple stuff, business process stuff. If this and this, then do that. If this and this, then do that. I don't need to know about abstraction and interfaces and virtual classes to do that, right? And if that kind of work goes to somebody else efficiently without destroying the system, so that I can focus on virtual classes and whatnot. So that's for me the big upside here. So to enable admins to do more part of my job so that I can get a cooler job. And my way of paying back admins, by the way, and then I shut up again, is we all should build components that admins can use in their flows, and mostly in their flows, right? By now you can take components and put them on flow screens. There's a pilot out there in Spring 20 where you can put your components in the flow builder. You understand me? So you can create your own custom action for your admin with a nice, lovely interface, and they can build automation business logic with it, right? And that frees us from the banal and simple stuff, what we do every second day, felt like, that's why I'm on ISV. I have different problems, but yeah. And that, I find it liberating, to say the least. And I hope it works that way, because who knows?
I kind of read from the release notes before I pass back to you to read from the literary word. We have system mode privileges for flows and process builders, which is kind of puts them on the same level as triggers without the capability to check for field level security. That's the downside. But you can validate all fields of the record and not just the ones that the user has access to. Before safe flows were added, that's the big thing that I showed you in the graph. Flows can be as fast as triggers if you use the before safe flow option. They changed the order of execution. Typically, code runs before clicks. This is the only time where clicks run before code, because that's what I learned from the Apex compiler team. It's something that's true, very dear to Chris Peterson's heart.
Triggers always win.
Triggers always win. Triggers always have the last word in each context. So in the before context, flow run first, and then triggers get their share and can blow everything the flow did out of the house. Querying records got easier. That's if you haven't worked with flow, you won't know what it needs.
Doesn't matter. Forget about it.
You get the fields. It's like select all from context. That's something the flow can do now.
So to illustrate the issue, why didn't I like to do flows a year ago or 2 years ago? Because I had to declare a lot of stuff that in code was basically at my fingertips, lists, account, okay, and there I have accounts with certain fields, and in Flow you first had to create your collection variable, then each individual variables, give them not only a name, but since I'm a good admin, I also give them a description, so I write a whole novel before I sit down to do any actual automation. And that is gone now. So working with records in Flow is really getting better and easier and more intuitive as well. Which, compared to the time when they bought the Flow engine, like 5 years ago, is interesting because it took Salesforce 5 years to get Flow into their core. And if you now think about the stuff that Salesforce recently bought, then you might realize you won't see any immediate benefits within the next 5 years. Because only now Flow is really becoming part of Salesforce core. 5 years. And Salesforce is a huge company, and I've heard they have quite a few engineers. But not to threat, I know we have here official Salesforce representatives with us. They have also constraints, like budget and time, like any of us. Like, even if the PM wants to do it, he can't because he has tickets that are more important. And they constantly need to make those decisions, and those aren't easy ones, and I wouldn't like to make them.
So the future is bright?
Yeah, I think so. Will Alba, can you please go for a moment?
It's okay.
So, technically speaking, awesome. Right, building flows got easier. Now we had to talk and understand why there are DML exceptions, although you don't use more DMLs just because you're a process builder, and that order of execution, especially in the context of the transaction vector that we have introduced, is the culprit and not the actual automation tool like Flow, process builder, or workflow. Okay, that sounds awesome. Should we now go and do everything in Flow? Maybe, maybe. But again, you need to, as always, where do you go in documentation of Salesforce? I always start with considerations for. Considerations. That's the nice term for, please be aware these things might not work as you expected, or they cost money. Or will cost money maybe in the future. And that's what we're seeing here. If you look in the Flow documentation, they are telling you that there are limits on waiting flow interviews, there are limits on executed screen flow interviews, and limits on executed auto-launch flows. So, to sum it up, Flow has its own set of limits. And Salesforce has not yet decided what to do with them. So, to my personal knowledge, these limits are currently not enforced. But, if you are hitting these limits, it might be that you get an email that somebody tells you, oh, we should have a talk. And my biggest fear here is that without, and I hope it will not happen, but my fear still is, okay, we have the limits that are documented. Now we have before say flows, and everybody goes in flows, and builds flows, and builds flows, and all of a sudden many more people will get such an email. But when they get such an email, their investment has already been done, right? They have already as many flows and flow interviews and users. And the question is, what happens then? And nobody has answered me that question so far. As I said, these are not yet hard limits. I can't swear to it, or so. As usual, I fear that somebody will try to make money out of it. Why not? Okay, you reach the given limits now. Please pay for more flows. I just hope they will be very upfront and transparent about it, because nobody really knows that those limits exist. I've talked to a few people, flow people, process builder people, and especially that process builder is flow, right? So if you're just a junior admin and go in and do process builder, and those limits are very high, really. So if you have 100 user board, forget it. You won't get there. If you are Allianz, like a huge enterprise, or BMW, or whatever, things might be different for you. So not to scare you away, please use flows, but also be aware there are limits, and these limits there's no additional information around the limits. Like for CPU time limits, we know dead end, full stop, right? But we don't know what happens when we reach those limits. Let's sum it up. Well, I think we had quite a run. I think we spoke already for about 40 minutes. Wow. Time has passed. So, as usual, and that shouldn't be big news, but we still need to stress it, yeah? Read the documentation and follow up with every release. And if you don't do it yourself, have somebody else do it for you, but thank you. In any case, you need to be up to date and at least look at the latter part of the development release notes there, where development stuff is summarized, where the APIs are summarized. That gives you a rough interview. Nobody wants you to read the upper third of the release notes, which are a lot of, well, more wordy marketing features. Limits are mostly introduced in the latter part. Also, think about how you want to implement your system. Think about governance, think about do's and don'ts in your org, and stick to them. Because as soon as you've reached a certain pain point, then you probably already know it's difficult to get rid of it. The org is live, data is already not processed anymore because we're hitting limits. That's really bad if you can't process business data the way it is supposed to be, because then we need to clean up, which is additional effort, which might lead us in additional problems, because nobody ever envisioned us updating 5,000 of those custom objects that we just blew because our process builder blew. Right? Debug logs. The debug logs are your best friends. Whenever anything blows up, you go to the debug log, you put a trace on the user, you open up the debug log in the developer console, and go to the analysis view. Everybody knows what the analysis view is? I want to see nods.
Yeah.
And if you can't nod, please touch anybody who's nodding and ask them about it, because it gives you a nice graphical visualization of there's a workflow running, now the trigger is running, now a process builder is running, now a trigger is running, now a process builder, trigger, limit exception. Analysis view, that's in there, it's built in, and although I work in VS Code most of the time for analysis, I go into developer console. Because in VS Code there aren't yet the tools. And generally speaking, there are very few tools to work with Salesforce logs. I only know of one, that's by Daniel Ballinger, and that's a Windows only tool, and it's on my Illuminate Cloud, yes, does that well, and that's about it. And I'm looking forward to what comes next in VS Code for us in order to get that information. Because Developer Console isn't fit to deal with the log sizes that we get by now. Right? I have a pretty powerful machine, a Surface Book, but if I load 20 MB of logs, which is the current max size, or was it 25? Anyway, when I started with Salesforce, it was easy. Debug logs were 2 MB. Now we have the tenfold amount. And a log is not just a row of text, as you might imagine. The row is a complex object, a complex JSON object within the developer console, and that takes lots of resources. So working with a large log in developer console isn't fun. So if I have to work with large logs, I usually can't go in the analysis view. So I need to download it and crunch it manually in VS Code or wherever in order to get my job done. But that's really important that you know that you can monitor visually what's happening in your order of execution. Right? KISS, yeah, avoid complexities if possible. KISS stands for keep it simple and stupid. I usually say, if you cannot draw it, do not build it, because you will lose oversight, especially for flows. It's a graphical user, and you should be able to immediately draw your solution on a piece of paper. If you can't, don't build it. Take the least complex design. Can you go full flow or full Apex? Does workflow match my requirements? Workflow is the one-click automation that hasn't any of the issues that we just discussed.
It never
And
sent
it
an
has,
email.
nobody ever received an email from a workflow saying I hit just some kind of system limit. And why is that? Because workflow and order of execution are very close, and workflow have their own special happy place within the order of execution. And that was by design back in the days when they thought about the whole core process. Process builder and flows are addendums to the whole safe order of execution. Hence, they restarted. They are not integral part, or at least they haven't been until spring 20, because now before safe flows are part of the safe order of execution. And you will need to test your operations with at least 201 records. Right? Either you insert them by Apex and so on wide with 201, because it will do at least 2 batches. Right? One batch of 200 records and another batch for 1. And that's actually a tip that you will also find for Apex code or for bulkifiable code. Use more than 1 or 2 records. Ideally use slightly over 200 records to force the system, especially in your test classes, to go the full bulkification cycle. I personally believe we are currently witnessing commotion in the force. So when I started with Salesforce, we had Visual Force and Apex. Now all of a sudden we have platform events. Just raise your hands. Who thinks that platform events changed something on the platform in a huge way?
Yeah. It's the only thing that ever escapes an exception.
For example,
you can send something out of an exception with a platform event.
I can't even top that up. So I believe Apex, and I was just talking to Ms. Franklin the other day about the vision of Salesforce, and that's one of the things. So platform events initiated a paradigm shift on a platform about which Salesforce doesn't want to talk yet. So Sarah Franklin is the VP of Platform, GM of Trailhead. She moved recently into the role of VP of Platform, so basically she's now responsible for a lot. And I was asking her, why aren't you telling people about that paradigm shift? And she said, because we're not there yet. But technically, you can build systems today very differently than yesterday, because you have platform events. And it's a very, very tiny, but I believe very important distinction to make. When something happened in your business before platform events, you had to somehow change data in order to trigger some other changes. So your business actions, whatever you needed to do, were tied to the data level. You needed to change some data on some record in order to get something firing. Okay? Are you following me so far? Now, platform events decouples your business need or business process or whatever from the actual data. Right? You can now go on and say, so for example, if you had something like a new customer, you went on the account and updated a field from prospect to customer, and then the trigger ran, right? You can now send an event upon a button click or even upon the change of the field that then cascades over all object that is needed and does a final DML on everyone at the very end. So you don't need to go through trigger loops and order of executions. But that is obviously only possible if you're starting to build a new org, like today, with all that knowledge in your mind. To bring an org from the old trigger world to the new decoupled platform event-based world is a feat that is probably too expensive. Full stop. And I believe we're moving and blazing trails to really something exciting. An event-driven platform with secure apps, with components across all devices, and also components that help admins do their job, and programmatic as well as visual development. And they will coexist on that platform. And we will do business with that. Our people, sales customers will do business with that. And the next sentence is basically the summary of what I've just told you. If you start thinking about your automations in terms of events, so what happens and what needs to happen then, instead of triggers like, okay, I'm on an account, the account changed, now look if some field has changed, old value, new value, and so on, things get easier actually, because you can split up your business in smarter ways than before. When you think about business right now, or a few years back in Salesforce, you needed to think about accounts and opportunities and what happens on each of them. Yeah. Now you can think in events. And events then touch accounts and opportunities and so on. And that makes, even if it's an intellectual distinction only, it makes a huge difference, I believe.
Just consider what you could do with the new Dreamforce announcement of evergreen serverless functions, where you just use the events to fire off something that is completely not in your platform coding world, and the platform side with the new additions to flows can be done completely declaratively, and us developers go to the heavy lifting, where there's an almost limitless world that takes its time, or whatever it's going to be. No one of us, except probably Albert, has seen everything, except at the demo booth, so we all don't know what's coming. But this concept obviously hooks exactly to where Sandro just guided us. Decide, go the programmatic road, and have something that really can do the heavy lifting, or go the other way and just click everything away and the light way, or fire another event and go there and there.
So what also belongs to that is when I started with Salesforce, basically the saying was, if it doesn't exist in Salesforce, I don't care. If it's not in Salesforce, it doesn't exist. Full stop. You want to integrate something? Yeah, we have APIs, integrate, I don't care. Right? Salesforce is my main go-to. Salesforce has changed that perception. Salesforce is now integral part of a network of integrations. They bought MuleSoft for exactly that, in order to communicate efficiently between all kinds of data stores. Customer 360 is the same story. If you don't communicate with all kinds of data stores, even the data store that is 10 years old and lives in the customer's basement, and is wired up with 2 copper wires that thick up to some kind of terminal, even this data could give you value into your business, right? And to end off, as usual, using force quotations, I personally felt a great disturbance in the force, as if of millions of CPU time exceptions suddenly cried out in terror and were suddenly silenced. Another pin, if somebody knows where this quotation is from. It's not Kafka, I can tell you.
Star Wars.
Yes, and who? Who was it? I need really to get into the force, people. Obi-Wan Kenobi was it, but he's dead nonetheless, of course. Let's see what I can roll. Oh, what again? It's a goatee. Thank you. What's that go? Right. Sorry? Well, we're done. I hope you liked it. If there are any questions, now the perfect time to ask. I liked presenting this thing the 3rd time, or I felt presenting with you at Dreamforce. It wasn't at Dreamforce this year, because it is, for me, it was a cool thing to see. Okay, I start with an idea a year ago. I work on the idea. I do my first talk. I revise my talk. I find new things. I talk to new people. We do another talk. And now we get an invitation from you guys, and we sit down and do another version of the talk in order to get everything in, because we felt like we can't do the same talk. It wouldn't be nice, it wouldn't be fair, and it wouldn't be honest, because we learned such a lot in the meantime. And the main goal was basically to give you everything we learned, a nice little package over there, so you can use it and think about it, and ask other people about it, and make a little bit of noise in order that these things get better documented. And in a way documented that you can work with them. Right? Nobody ever told us Process Builder uses a DML. Why do I need to go into the debug logs to find out and be surprised? And get a what the fuck? I mean, I used workflow rules. I never saw a DML, and now they say, okay, Process Builder is a new thing, and if you look closely, oh. Right? I can live totally with the DML statements, right? Like chunks of 200, I do an insert, but that I need to query the record first, and that was a revelation for me, and that was the thing where I said, okay, I want to crunch debug logs now, and gladly Daniel assisted me in that, in order to find out what's happening there. Because and our idea was, yeah, well, order of execution, it's just bad tools. No, the tools aren't that bad. They're specific tools, they have their specialities, but if you know about them, like DML and queries and so on, you can design around them or with them. And that's something that I believe is still a little bit missing. It's a little too easy in Trailhead to go on Process Builder and do this and that and that. And I wonder how Trailhead will gauge the gap between, okay, I'm a junior admin doing something in a Trailhead board, and now I'm responsible for 200 users, and each faulty update on data costs the business money. I don't know how we get from here to there. Like from, this is how it could work, and this is where we lose money because we didn't know how to read documentation.
Cat rescue versus printing an invoice.
Yeah, something, yeah. The bear tracking app. Instead of, or doing something with quotes or whatever. Anyway, we love Trellet. No, don't get me wrong. I love Trellet. I really do. I've got like, I'm not saying. I've got a few patches, and I'm still continuing to collect them because I love tone, and it's just fun doing Trellet, right? And you can learn a lot. And I feel sometimes the marketing people tell the writing people, no, we want that at the moment. Then we won't get that at the moment, like workflow and process. There's no, or order of execution. Funny anecdote to end off, Daniel, please. What were you asked to do for a Dreamforce presentation? Call to action.
The first call to action is confirm your attendance. Second call to action is please name 3 Trailhead modules that people should do for your talk. And my abstract clearly read, unfortunately, there are no badges and modules on Trailhead on the order of execution. That was not exactly what the content team wants to hear. So I came up with the 2 most relevant. I had a long call with Sander the night before I had to give that, and he came up with an enormously great idea. Find the ones that are most relevant to understand, and I came up with .NET, Apex Basics for .NET developers.
Have you looked at that into that thread?
That's the one module that gives you most information on the technical context of developing on a Salesforce platform, because it's written for developers that they want to turn over, and they have to tell them how to work on Salesforce. There are 900 badges, and this one is geared at .NET developers, and really, I stay away from .NET.
Me too.
I recommended the .NET developers, and I recommended the developer console basics, so that you learn all the nine steps to learn everything about the developer console. It's more helpful than reading the documentation, because you can open the developer console and you can see every time a customer calls, like, your system ran for half a year. Suddenly, your trigger broke. And I go into the org and look at the last modified dates of the process builders. Then I open the developer console and look at the log, and the log says workflow trigger, workflow trigger, workflow trigger, workflow trigger, workflow trigger. Like, okay, I kind of know what's going on here. And I'm not sure, can we talk about the workflow?
I think so.
Really?
Yes, we're more friends here, right?
One thing that we ended the call with the Flow team about how Flow logs into the debug logs, and Sandra took the courage to say, why on earth are you logging as workflows?
So you need to give a little context. So you have a process builder, like the one that does the Booleans, and if you look at the logs, then you won't find process builder in there. You will find flow interviews, but we wanted to know, okay, what starts off those flow interviews? And you will find an ID that is referring to a process builder that you built, but it's not an ID really accessible in your org. And next to it is the category in the debug logs, and that clearly states workflow. And my question was, so why exactly, and I mean, I thought we weren't using workflows anymore, and now you tell me process is technically a workflow. And their answer was that they...
Can you imagine how difficult it is to get a new category into the debug logs? That's another PM, and they do scrutinize every keyword that goes into the debug logs. So they said, okay, here we have process builder or flow, and they said, okay, we're scrutinizing that. And it was like a while back. So they decided to go with the label of workflow because it was already there. Reuse your functionality. Like, that's why I don't want to point the finger at Jason.
Also remember, they are working to change it.
Yeah,
right?
they were.
So they want more information around process builder, and as Diane hinted at, next release, summer release that is, and winter release probably as well, will have some updates to flow
Yeah.
process builder, because process builder, as nice as it is as an automation tool, it's a horror for maintenance. So, example, you go into a new org, you need to find out which automations run there. What do you do, right? What I did is write a script. A Ruby script opens up the browser, makes the browser huge, opens each individual process builder, and takes a screenshot and saves it back onto my file system. Why? Because it's declarative automation, right? And if you ever were in the UI, you know how ugly it is to click there and find and go back and then back to all process, right? So I want to ingest that. I don't want to spend my time clicking and the maintenance of that, or even think about, okay, let's assume you have a bunch of Flownatics and they build great functionality. So there are two issues for me with that currently. First of all, I like things to be tested. And you can, by now, I don't know if you knew, but there is test coverage now for flows. So yeah, you can test them.
Coverage section.
Yeah, I know, but you can query for that. So yeah, there's test coverage, but the tests that run or test your flows need to be written in code. So basically, if you have a Flownatic, you need someone else to write test code for it, which just doesn't scale. That's one thing. And the other thing is, for me personally, review. So if I was like team lead of 20 Flownatics, how can I give them proper guidelines, reviews in what they do? Are they sending me a screenshot and I scribble my, so did you ever do a review on GitHub, code review, so somebody goes through your code and says that's and that? That's what I'm envisioning. Like, okay, here you could do the loop, that and this and that and that. So where do I put those comments? How do I give them feedback? And in an efficient way, right? Not in like I go now to this person, sit down with him, let me explain everything, then I go to the next person, because if I do that, I don't do any work anymore. So those are my issues, and I hope they will go away with time maybe, but maybe we need some new tools and new techniques and new designs to think about how do we actually maintain and test visual tools, so visual automation tools. Yeah, I think we
Already going from here to there and back and forth.
yeah, and we already spent 1.5 hours. Sorry for that. So I do hope you had a good time.
We have just a small head-ups from one of our
Yes,
attendees.
time for questions, of course.
Well, he's saying that, sorry, because I closed it, okay. To be careful with the platform events, because you may face a bottleneck. That's because the platform events works as a queue.
That's there's something interesting about it. One thing is the platform events that you can use on your org are low volume platform events. Insert coin for high volume platform events. One issue. Next issue, they are written into a queue, and the queue handles the order, handles a strict order, but works at its own pace. So things can happen, can take a while. They are typically quite fast, but there's a limit as they sell high volume platform events. Low volume platform events must be somehow different. I haven't had no issues with the speed in the queue. The next thing, the execution context a platform event can hold. You react or respond to platform events with a trigger. This trigger will have an execution context of 1 to 1,000 records. So the execution context is larger. For every trigger, you can expect the number of records that go in there will be 1 to 200, but no way to go over 200. For platform events, a trigger can scale up to 1,000 platform events in the trigger context.
Absolutely. And to answer that, yes, you need to think about that. But to us, we think about Salesforce Classic, right? We had either synchronous or asynchronous stuff happening. And coming from that perspective, you might believe that platform events are asynchronous stuff. I believe there's something else. obviously they're run asynchronously, but they're not an asynchronous batch job that is running. So they are on a different level of, I can't really point, I would say they're on a different ontological level, but that might not be very helpful in this circumstance. And yes, you need to write very efficient triggers for platform events, but the question is, what do you put in your platform event? So if you think about what I said, so just put an abstraction in there, so basically your platform event has just a name, no fields, no nothing. The logic of the trigger doesn't need to do a lot, just receives the event and triggers some business logic. It doesn't need to do a lot of calculation within the event trigger, that's what I'm saying. It just gives them out. And about synchronous and asynchronous, Daniel already knows the example, bear with me, yes. So imagine yourself now being in Lightning Experience. You change a record. What happens when you change a record? You usually get a toast, right? So far so good? Can you tell me whether that was a synchronous or asynchronous transaction?
Nice.
No, you can't. And that's what I'm saying. The whole Lightning Experience platform is event-driven. And I believe so will be the core platform in a few years as well.
That's right.
So there is no more distinction between synchronous and asynchronous. There's only event-driven.
Yeah.
And there pops up a Lightning JavaScript event, there might be a platform event, there might be new types of events.
Yeah.
But the idea how we built architectures 10 years ago, another thing that I told Sarah is, yeah, well, give us those certified technical architects that already know how to build for this new kind of stuff. Because if I hire now someone with 10 years of experience as a CTA, she or he will give me the usual, okay, this is synchronous, and there we go asynchronous, and